have some stuff going on out of the usual. This is kind of an unfortunate confluence of a couple different things. I need to take a personal day. We have evaluations and I forget what the other thing was. I posted this in detail for you, but I did want to run through it as well. So basically, next Wednesday, which is the 26th, that day will proceed as normal with both lecture and office hours, and it will be the last day that I will cover potentially homework number 8 and exam number 2 material. So wherever we get to there, that's going to be the cutoff. If necessary, I will even chop stuff off of homework 8, but I think it's more likely that we will, if anything, finish even earlier, but that's my official cutoff. So everything we discuss after that will be covered on the final, okay? Your lecture is as normal, and your lab that afternoon is also as normal. You'll be doing the electron charge to mass ratio, just to give you a heads up right now. That's a particularly expensive apparatus, and we are not going to be able to get 9 setups going. As you know, we've been trying to hack together some extra setups here because of the extra enrollment. That's not a possibility for that lab, so it's going to be a little crowded. Again, I apologize. That's the downside to trying to squeeze in a few extra students. Okay. So here's where the changes start. On Thursday, the 27th, normally I would have, well, of course we don't have lecture or lab that day, but I do have office hours. Normally these would be 11 to 12. These are canceled. I have to move them earlier into the day. And since I have no idea whether or not that time works for anyone or if you're in class, I'm going to say it's by appointment. So that just means email me by the night before and tell me that that works for you and you want to get together, and I'll come in. If no one emails me and requests to meet, then I won't be here, okay? So just let me know if that works for you, and we'll do it. On next Friday, a week from today, both lecture and office hours are canceled. Okay, so that's a completely Physics 260 ILCA-free day for you. Okay, and then the following Monday, which is May 1st, lecture will be as normal. It will either be me or it will be Adam subbing for me, presenting you material that I have presented, or I've asked him to give you. And office hours are to be determined. If Adam is here subbing for me, then he's not going to also sub my office hours, so office hours will be canceled. But if I am here, then I will hold them as normal. Check for an update on that. I don't know yet, but probably about 48 hours prior to that, I will post an update to indicate if I'm going to be here or not. So even though I've finished lecturing on the material, and by that Monday you'll also have finished homework 8 as well, I really don't like to cancel office hours at all in the run-up to an exam. And so on Tuesday, 2nd, which by the way is the day before your exam, I will have to cancel office hours in the morning, but instead I will have for you a review session. So this is hopefully makes up for the fact that I've missed 2 or possibly 3 different office hours on days where you might want to get help. So the review session will be from 3 to 5 p.m. and that will be in room 7104. So that'll give you 2 hours to ask me questions. I won't have anything formal prepared, and that's because this is is happening outside of class time, and it wouldn't be fair to students who can't make it because they have to be elsewhere. So bring questions. If you want to see me redo a homework question, do one of the practice exam questions, you have another random question, you just want me to talk about a topic again, you tell me what you want to do with it. It's your review session. And this is by me directly. Presumably PO will also be doing review sessions in the SI sessions as well. Yes? You'll be doing exam review?
It really depends on what they want.
Okay, so I'm going to guess they want review before the exam, but again, talk to them, see what your regulars want to do. So, this I wanted to let you know well in advance because if there's a possibility that you can get free, if you wouldn't otherwise normally be, then you have the opportunity to do that. And again, I really don't like this stretch here where basically from Thursday through Tuesday, my office hours are kind of getting shuffled around or we're not meeting. But I do want to remind you that I'm always available by email. I'll be available by email continuously through this entire period if you have any questions. And if it's getting really cumbersome to shoot emails back and forth, we could even arrange virtual office hours. I have some computer applications that can do that. So hopefully you don't feel like you're out there on your own when you're preparing for the exam. On Wednesday, 5/3, that of course is the day of your exam. So exams in lab. In the morning, in lecture, the lecture on the morning of an exam is always a little bit of a weird dead space. Attendance tends to be low, or because I don't know, some students have pulled an all-nighter or whatever happened there. But anyways, it's good to be able to parallel process things. But because this tends to be a little bit of a dead space, I have scheduled evaluations. So I get periodically evaluated. And for some reason, this used to be, for those of you who remember, it used to be about 10 minutes at the end of class. Now that they moved to computerized evaluations, now they need 30 minutes at the beginning of class, which, I don't know, to me seems a little bit excessive. But so I put it somewhere where hopefully it's not too disruptive. So these are by computer, so what they're going to do is they're just going to wheel in a laptop cart, and they're going to ask you to log into WebSmart and complete it. I should mention that this evaluation is already available in WebSmart. You can do it anytime. So you can do this anytime between the 17th and the 5th on your own in WebSmart. The reason why they're coming in to do evaluations is not because you're not perfectly capable of doing it in the comfort of your own home, but because the response rate has typically been fairly low, and so they're forcing the issue. So they're basically coming and nannying you into doing it if you haven't gotten around to doing it yourself. So if you've already done it, then you can just show up somewhere in the region of whatever, 10 to 20 minutes late that morning. I don't know. They've asked me to block out 30 minutes, which is most of our class, for that. So I have no idea. It's really up to you how long it takes, because when the last person is done, we can continue with our class time. So again, you can do it anytime on your own, or if not, they will force the issue that morning and require you to do it. That is just what the administration has asked us to do. And if, or whatever time remains of the class, I'll do further review. So perhaps some people who are not able to make this review session because it just doesn't work for them, I will do further review. Hopefully that will structure you to that morning. If you have done the evaluation on your own and you feel satisfied in the amount of review you've gotten, there's no reason to come in for that lecture, okay? But if you're I would strongly suggest that you then do the evaluation before this date, because they will start to try to chase after you to do it if you haven't yet gotten it done, okay? So, yet while it's technically open till the 5th, if you haven't done it by the 3rd, they're gonna start bothering you and asking you to make sure to do it, okay? So that's kind of the schedule in the next few weeks. After that, we're back to normal. It's mostly office hours that is getting affected. The only issue, or the only lecture that's actually truly canceled is Friday the 28th, okay? And again, that's one of the major things to note, so you don't walk in and wonder where everybody is. And then, of course, the other major item to note is the review session. And then, if you have done your evaluation and you have been satisfied with your review, you don't have to come to class the morning of the exam. Question?
What are you going to be doing during that downtime in the beginning of class?
I will be somewhere else to give you your privacy.
Oh.
So,
But
what,
if you've done this ahead of time, would you be available?
oh yeah, I'll just be sitting in my office waiting for the call from the admin that you guys are, everyone's done with the evaluations and I can come up and,
They don't quarantine you?
well, I'm quarantined in my office, basically, right? So, if you do want to, ask me questions, I will be just sitting in my office waiting for the call to come back up here and, continue class. So I want to give you your, privacy while you're working on it, but then try to get out here as soon as possible after everyone's finished. And so again, it's hard to plan on a lecture when I have no idea how much time remains, so I'm just gonna block it out for further questions you might have. Question?
So our test kit is in the room again, or will we?
Yes, it is in a different room again. If I haven't announced it yet in class, it is on the exam review materials, and it's gonna be exactly the same rooms as you tested in last time. So I was able to secure those same rooms that are available those times. So wherever you went in the Wednesday afternoon lab, that's where you'll be going again. And then there was a different room for the Wednesday evening lab, and you'll be going there again, okay? And it is on the exam review materials. And any other questions on this? Okay, so I posted this all available for you as well on the web, but I know that there's quite a few things that are shuffled around. I should also mention, just sort of unrelated, but Friday the 5th is our research symposium for the year. So, research symposium. The poster session, which some of you will be actually presenting at, is noon to 1. And the reason I mention this is just for simple promotion. It's a nice thing to come down and see what your classmates are up to. And moreover, if you do show up to that and you haven't already collected your course extra credit, I'm offering it as an extra option. So just flag me down if you're already there, or if you choose to come down there, I'll record your name and get your extra credit. So that's just kind of to encourage you to come down and support your classmates on that event. It's down in the cafeteria. Okay, any questions before we get started? Okay, so for Summit Current segment is what we were up to last time. Just a little tiny shuffle, and we can express our same exact force law in terms of current instead of the velocity of the individual charged particles. So here we had positive charges moving down a wire, and of course a bunch of them constitutes a current. And so our force law became ILB sine of theta between the current and magnetic field. So you need to put in the amount of current that's flowing through this segment, how long it is, the strength of the magnetic field that it's in. Never have to worry if it's sine or cosine, it's always sine. And then you measure the angle between the current and magnetic field. The right-hand rule is exactly the same as it was for a single charged particle. Now, instead of a single charged particle with a velocity v, well, the current, of course, points exactly the same way, right? Current is the same direction as the motion of positive charges. So I slap I into B, like that. Those don't have to be perpendicular. In the case, my case, they happen to be. So, and then the force will be up. And remember that the force ends up having to be perpendicular to both of those. So you can see that this is essentially just a way of doing the same rule we had for a single charged particle, but in aggregate. We have now a bunch of them constituting a current. It's in some sense even easier because for charged particle we had both positive and negative charges, right? So we had to remember that for negative charges, you do the right-hand rule and reverse your answer, or use your left hand. Well, that's going to be not even relevant here because for us, current is always made out of positive charges. And if you might want to point out that really we know that current is made out of negative charges going to the left, we can certainly double check here. If we do the slap rule on this guy, so slap V into B, force is down, but it's a negative charge, so force is up. So we once again see that there is no harm in our playing pretend, right? So we said that current is made out of positive charges seeking lower voltage, even though at this point we already know that it's negative charges seeking higher voltage, but there's still no penalty for this, right? The right answer we can get by pretending always that current is made out of positive charge carriers, okay? Now, there are very few circumstances, one of which I will talk about, but there are very, very few circumstances where it matters, which is to say, when is it that you get penalized for pretending current is made out of positive charges going this way when they're really negative charges going this way? Well, in nearly every application except one, which I'll talk about next week, called the Hall effect, it doesn't matter. You get to keep pretending and all the answers are right. Any questions on that? Okay, so for those of you that are familiar with the cross product, I might want to bundle this into a single law. Now, you guys know for a cross product, two vectors go in and one vector comes out. Now, what are the two vectors that go in? One is obviously the magnetic field, but current isn't a vector. Current has not been a vector thus far. It's kind of weird because of course it has a flow direction, but it's not formally defined as a vector. We're not going to start doing that now. Current does not become a vector. So instead, the law looks like this. So current is still a number, and we take current to be positive, but we kind of slip in the direction of current in this weird way. L is defined as a vector which has a size of L, the length of this thing, and a direction which is the same direction as the current. So that's how we slip in the direction of the current somehow. We slip it into this new vector which is the L vector. So L vector is of length L, but it has a direction that is the direction of the current. Okay? So again, that's if you've seen the cross product. If you've never seen a cross product in your life, don't worry about it. You don't need it. You can just use this more verbose size and direction scheme. So at this point, we got the new law there. We're just going to use it for any current segment. But there's something weird and artificial about this because of course currents don't just begin and end out of thin air, right? This current has to come from somewhere and has to go somewhere. So really, while this would be perfectly fine for some particular applications, maybe the magnetic field itself is only confined to a certain region. So the wire keeps going, it comes from somewhere and it goes somewhere, but the other portions of the wire aren't subjected to a magnetic field. So that would be one application where this would be perfectly fine to use. But more often, this thing that we just wrote down is like a building block. It allows us to figure out the force on any particular segment, so we can assemble a bunch of segments together. So that's what I'm going to do next. I'm going to talk about a current loop. So I'm going to have a rectangle. This, of course, is more typical, right? Current flows in a closed loop. For instance, there might be a battery or a resistor or something in that loop. I don't bother to draw it. I'm just showing the current, of course, circulating. But this is more typical. So there's a current I that's going around and around. And I guess let me go ahead and give some dimensions to the loop as well. Let's say it's a rectangle, so this will be L1 and this will be L2. So this current loop is just 4 of these single segments. So let's go ahead and find out what happens. We'll just go ahead and do the slap rule. It'll give us a chance to do this, practice the slap rule 4 times because there are 4 sides, right? So let's start with the top. Well, the top is exactly the same as this, but let's go ahead and do it anyway. We'll slap I. Okay, so point your fingers along I. It's to the right. I orient my palm so I can slap I into B. Force is up, like so. Oh, and by the way, I should mention that this magnetic field is uniform, okay? Okay, let's skip to the bottom segment. Now the bottom segment feels exactly the same magnetic field, but the direction of the current is the opposite, so what's going to happen with the force?
Opposite direction?
The force just reverses, exactly. So if you change nothing else except the direction of the current, the force will reverse as well. If you want to do the right-hand rule, of course, slap I into B, forces down. So what happens with those 2 forces? Are they the same, or which one's bigger? The same. Same current, same length, and the same field as well, because it's a uniform field. And this is 90 for both of them, okay? Right. That current, those currents happen to be 90 degrees of the field. So those are going to cancel. So this is the same current, same length, and same B. The only difference, of course, is the direction. So those 2 forces are going to cancel. All right. So let's do the side segments, the left and the right segments. So what right-hand rule practice? I point my fingers along I, and then I go like this. I try to figure out which way to orient my palm. Of course, I want my palm into the page so I can slap I into B. Force is this way, right? Force is to the left on the left segment.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, before I draw the length of it and give it away, is this force going to be bigger or smaller than or the same as the other 2?
Bigger?
Bigger. Why?
I is bigger?
I is.
I mean,
L is the same I.
I, same I.
L is bigger. That's right. Okay. So this is bigger than the other 2 because of the L. It's the longer dimension. The longer the current segment, the more force it'll feel. It just carries more positive charges in it, right? Same current, but that means more charge over a longer length. It's like, you know, a mile of a river has more water than a foot of a river, right? Okay? So, what's the direction of the force on the right side? Opposite. And is it bigger or smaller than this counterpart on the other side? Same. So those are going to cancel. So what's the net force on this current loop?
0.
0, okay? So the net force is 0 on this current loop. So you might ask, is that a result that is just in particular a coincidence? Well, that is the result because the field is uniform. Okay. If the field was stronger on the bottom, then the force on the bottom would be stronger, right? If the force was bigger on the, if the field itself was bigger on the left, then this left force would dominate over the right one, right? So the net force would not be 0 if it's a non-uniform field. Okay. Does that make sense? Okay. This is, by the way, not the first time we've seen this result. Let me point out last time we saw this result. Remember we had that neutral conductor, and we put it into a uniform field like this. So what we learned is that if you do that, yes, it'll charge polarize. So minus, 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 plus, plus, plus. But we learned that these minus charges will feel a force just as much upstream as these plus charges do downstream. And the net force was what? 0. Exactly. So it's a common theme that neutral objects experience no force in a uniform field. Now, you might ask, is this neutral? Well, it actually is. Because while it is positive charge circulating around, that's what current is, it's of course doing it across a background of negative charge that are fixed, right? Now, it seems really, really weird and backwards to talk about it like this. So let me remind you, what is it really? It's electrons that are circulating across the background of positively charged nuclei that are fixed, right? This is not a cascade of charged particles moving around freely in free space. This is a wire. So a wire has both kinds of charges, just that only one kind of charge is in motion, right? So it's very analogous to this. So this was on one of your homework questions. I don't remember. I think it's the first question. First question on homework 3, I think. There was a neutral conductor in a uniform field. And then many students say that the force is something, but the reason it's not happens to be 0 is because the field is uniform. You have to have a non-uniform field for there to be force. So this is a non-uniform E external, then the net force is something. So if you put in a neutral conductor there, it'll charge polarize. Minuses go upstream, pluses go downstream. But then these particular charges are in a larger field, and these are in a smaller field, right? And so the net force ends up being which way? Left. Yeah. The net force on this neutral conductor in a non-uniform field is into the direction of stronger fields. So F net is towards the stronger field. So this gets pulled toward something of stronger field, and we pointed out why is the field getting stronger? It's probably because you're getting closer to whatever caused it. And so this is where I talked about static cling, right? The fact that neutral objects can be attracted to charged ones. You guys did it with the styrofoam packing peanuts bits getting attracted to your glass rod. You remember this? This is going way back. Or maybe recently you did laundry and forgot to put in the dryer sheet, right? And those charged objects that come out stick to everything, right? Because they'll attract anything neutral. So, there we have it. Familiar behavior from before. Net force is 0 on a current loop if the field is uniform, and then it's not 0 if it's a non-uniform field. It's familiar results, it's just with a magnetic field now instead of an electric field. Now you might question, is this a general result? Because of course I very specifically did it with a rectangular shape, right? You might be skeptical, is this really true for any current loop? Well, it is. This is just more easily digestible because a rectangular loop has 4 distinct sides, so you can apply this formula 4 times. But if it was shaped like this, let's say you had a current loop shaped like this, well, you need to use your calculus techniques because it isn't clear what are the sides, right? But you get the same result. This is why. You would just turn it into something like this. Man, this is going to take a while. So on, you get that, okay? So you're turning it into a bunch of infinitesimal straight segments. And for every segment that's over here, that's carrying current this way, there'll be another one over here. So you just pair them up, right? This and this are like this and this. And you will find, doing that very cumbersome integration, that the result is the same. Because whatever current flows up this side and experiences force one way, that current has to return on the other side, and so it will cancel. So this is a general result on any closed current loop, if it's a uniform field. Okay, so I just used the rectangular shape because it's easier to see, but it is a general result. Any current loop in a uniform magnetic field experiences 0 force. So, you might think, well, okay, if that's boring, so you might think we're going to jump straight to a non-uniform field, but in fact, we're going to stay doing the case where the field is uniform. You might say, that sounds boring. If the loop is just going to sit there, experience no net force, what possible excitement could there be to looking at a current loop in a uniform field? Well, there's still a lot of interesting stuff that can happen, okay? So, it might not be obvious from this one because nothing really does happen to that, but what I want to do is I want to change my perspective just a little bit. So here's my current loop. It's very similar to what I just did here. Okay, there's my current loop. And in order to see the interesting part, I want to turn and look at this from the side view. Okay, so I want to have that the current comes toward you, it goes across, it goes in, and then of course the only downside of drawing it from the edge view like this is that I can only draw 3 of the 4 currents, right? You have to imagine that there's 1 current returning in the back. So you notice that it's marked with a dot here toward you, across, in, and then we'll be satisfied with drawing 3 of the 4 sides. So let me go ahead and draw that guy. Here's my current loop from a different orientation. Current comes out, goes across, goes in, and again, we can't draw the 4th side, but we're going to have to live with that. And let me also orient the magnetic field like this. And again, let me say that it's uniform. So let's figure out what happens here. So let me do each of the currents in turn. First, the current that comes out of the page. Okay? So current is coming toward you. It's this one I'm working on. Okay? Then I need to orient my palm. I point my palm down because the magnetic field is down. So I slap. Okay? Is this the orientation I want to do first? Man, this is not the orientation I want to do first. Sorry. What orientation I want to do first?
The one coming towards us?
No. I had it in the right thing, but I want to do it like this. Sorry about that.
It's still a closed current loop.
Yeah, it's still a closed current loop. I just didn't draw it in the orientation I wanted to start with. The one I just drew I'll do later, but this one is still on the edge view, but instead of looking like this, it's looking like this. Okay? So let's start with that one. So here we go. So this current comes out of the page. Magnetic field goes down. So I slapped in a B, force is this way. So this particular segment, the force is that way. Okay. Let's do the bottom one next. So the bottom one, current goes into the page, okay, and then you have to twist your palm. When I orient my palm downward, so I can slap it into B, forces to the left. No surprise because, of course, that's the counterpart to the current up top. So I just reverse the current, but nothing else reverses, so the force is going to have to be opposite. This is a tricky one, the current flowing right down the front side. How do you slap I into B when I is already in the same direction as B? What do I do?
Magnitude.
Coming out of the page.
Well, remember, in order to feel any force at all, you have to cut across the field line.
Oh, multiply by unit vector?
There's no force.
No
Right.
force, no.
So the ILB sine theta is sine of 0. So the front side, there's no force at all
Projection.
because the theta is 0. Sine of 0 is 0. Or you can think of it as all those charges are moving parallel to the field line, so they don't have any perpendicular component. It's the same on the back side, which is the fourth side we can't see. There the angle is 180 because those charges are moving directly against the field. But again, no force. Remember, you have to cut across the field line. So you can see what I've done here is I have put all the action into the plane of the page, right? So the only forces that exist are in the plane of the page. And we look at this, and does my claim that the net force is 0 hold? You have a right force and a left force, so those cancel.
Yeah.
And yet, looking at this, seems like something's going to happen, right? What's going to happen?
So rotate.
It's going to rotate. Okay. So this is where your favorite topic from Physics 250 comes in, torque. I'm being sarcastic. You probably hated it. Okay. So let me remind you that F net equals ma is only a law for the center of mass. So if we find that the net force is 0 on a current loop, it means that the center of mass has to stay put. The center of mass stays at rest. So if this is 0, this is 0, center of mass stays at rest if it was at rest before. That's only one point of the whole object. There could be
Inertia.
net torque. And if so, it will cause the angular acceleration of the rest of the object. So there may be some rotation suddenly started up where there was no rotation before, okay? And you can clearly see that here. This tends to make this thing rotate clockwise around the center of mass, yes?
Yes.
And this, even though the force is in the opposite direction, it's also on the opposite side of the pivot. They both agree that this should experience clockwise torque, right? So this, the net torque, is not zero. And therefore, the angular acceleration won't be zero either. So if we want to be kind of loose, we say clockwise. But in Physics 250, hopefully you found a more sophisticated way to talk about rotation. The reason, I guess let me remind you first, let's say we use X, Y, and Z comes out of the page. Remember, the more sophisticated way to talk about rotation is to wrap your finger in the actual direction of the rotation, and then we say that the angular, the torque and angular acceleration is actually into the page. Okay, so this would be minus k hat because I've set outward to be the plus k hat, right? Is this something that you guys have seen in Physics 250? Okay. Again, briefly, why do you do this? Well, if you're looking at any rotation face on, you can say it's counterclockwise or clockwise. That's perfectly fine, but there are a couple issues with it, okay? It depends on your perspective. So if, let's say, we look at two people on both sides of the same motion, which way would you say it's rotating? Clockwise or counterclockwise? Counterclockwise, how about you? Clockwise. They said opposite things. They're looking at the same thing. It would be nice to have a system where they agree. So what they both will do, if we both agree, they both agree that this way is the, I don't know, plus x-axis or whatever, it doesn't matter. They both wrap their fingers, go get out your right hand, both wrap your fingers around the rotation direction. Okay? Which way is your thumb point? Toward the windows. Which way is your thumb point? Toward the window. They both agree. Okay? That's why this notation exists. And by the way, it's really important. If you're looking face on a rotation like this, you can't even say if it's counterclockwise or clockwise. It doesn't even make any sense anymore if you're looking at a rotation on the edge. That's why this right-hand rule exists. Okay? But think of it as like an axis of rotation enhanced. Okay? So it's like an axis of rotation enhanced. Okay? So we say that the torque is this way because the thing is going this way. If it was instead torque the other way, we'd say this, okay? There's nothing actually physically going in or out of the board, okay? This is just our fancy pants way of describing rotation for reasons that we've just discussed, okay? So you'll find one problem on your homework, which is basically just a review of this. I know that you guys didn't all take Physics 250 with atoms, so I want to make sure everyone's on the same page with the more advanced way to describe these rotational quantities, okay? So, from here, let's take a look at what is the fate of this current loop. We know it's going to not just sit there, it's actually going to angularly accelerate. So right now we have two forces which are pretty much perfectly oriented to rotate it, right? Let's take a look at it a little bit further on in its rotation, and I'll draw it right here. I don't mean to imply that the whole loop has moved to the right. Remember, we said that the center of mass is to stay at rest, but I can't draw it all on top of itself, okay? Right? I need some more room to draw. So I've shifted this to the right. I don't mean that the loop actually moves to the right, okay? So let's take a look. Let me make sure it's the same current loop here. Just rotate it a little bit. So here it is a little bit further on in the rotation. Let's do the right-hand rule again on all the segments. Well, here's the cool thing. Even as this loop rotates, this current is still out of the page. It's out of the page here, it's out of the page here. So for that segment, I can just copy the force, looks like this. Same thing here. Nothing's changed about those two. Let's do the front now. The front, I slap I into B. I is no longer running parallel to B, so okay, like that, short slap, force is out. So now that on the front, the force is out. If you did it out the back, it'd be a long slap, it would go in. Now they're not both zero alone, but they do still cancel. So if you carefully think about it, you'll find that those forces also pull radially out from the center of mass, so no further torque contribution. So that's why I, of course, put all the action into the plane of the page. So everything that's relevant to what will happen to this loop is drawn, okay? So here's what you notice. These forces are still partially tangential, but they're starting to fall off a bit, right? If you and your friend open a revolving door, you go like this, right? And you adjust your direction of your force to keep it tangential to the circle, yes?
Mm-hmm.
Okay? That's how you open a door, right? You keep going like that. These forces are not doing that. They are in a constant direction. So at some point, they become more and more useless to the rotation. Notice how much this force has shifted. If just being in the same direction, it is now significantly fallen off the circular path, right? So the torque is still something, but the torque has decreased. So the torque has decreased. And you can hopefully see where I'm going with this. The torque eventually becomes zero. That happens when you get into this orientation right here. The forces on these two current segments, the forces haven't changed. So now that you can see that they're just pulling radially out from the pivot, right? So at this point, the torque has gone to zero. So if I try to show you on this current segment I have, initially the forces I have, this one this way, this one this way, initially they are very helpful for rotation, but by the time you get to like this, no torque, right? If these forces pull in a fixed direction in space, they go from being helpful for rotation to being useless for rotation. See that? Okay. So, you might ask, does it just stop there? Well, if you released it from rest, then yes, it would just stay there. But if you let it go from rest here and it's built up all this angular velocity, just because the torque shuts off at that moment doesn't mean it stops moving either, okay? So it's actually going to overshoot. So let's take a quick look at the overshooting part. So we draw in the current loop again. When it's rotated a little further. And I put in the same forces. That's the beauty of those two forces on the ends, is that since the currents are not changing direction, the forces don't change direction. What do those forces want to do now? Which way is the torque going? counterclockwise, or plus k hat, right? So the torque is now trying to get it to go back this way. And that torque is plus k hat, or counterclockwise. Now, this is ringing a bell that you are having something that speeds up going to a certain point, it overshoots and wants to come back. You say, that reminds me of a pendulum. Well, that's exactly the behavior of a current loop in a magnetic field. It is a pendulum. So we'll work out the details, we'll work out some shorthand on Monday.